After selling thousands of items on eBay, it has finally happened to me. I had a buyer return a completely different item than the one that I had sold to them. Now, I have experienced my fair share of returns on eBay, from just buyers not wanting the item to buyers lying about the item so that they can get a free return, all the way to actual scammers who take parts out of an item and return the original item. However, I have never once had a buyer return the completely wrong item until this week. In today's video, I'm going to share with you my return policies on eBay, how I managed to keep my return rate so low on the eBay platform. And if you stick around to the end, I'm going to share my story of this return and the fight that I had with eBay over multiple days that ended with me signing a sketchy contract from eBay. The average return rate for e-commerce is around 20%. That is almost double brick and mortar. So if you sell on the eBay platform, you are going to end up getting returns. It's just part of selling online. Now, everyone's business and business model is going to be different. And depending on what you sell, your return rate is going to vary. So in this video, I'm just going to share what works for me and the steps that I use for my business. It might not work for your business. However, this should get you thinking in the right mindset to create policies that will work for your business. When it comes to returns on eBay, I have 5 policies that I just follow, and this removes all the emotion from the return. When I first started out, when I got a return request, I took it personally, and I know a lot of other sellers will also take it personally. If you receive a return request, you're going to feel defensive. You're going to say, hey, this item is described how it was. I don't know why you didn't check the measurements. It should fit you. And you're going to have a bunch of excuses to try to make up for the fact that the person just wants to return the item. I have learned that you have to remove emotions from the return process. And for me, this meant creating a few policies and procedures so that when I get a return request, I know exactly what I'm going to do, what I'm going to say, and how I'm going to handle it. And it's no different for any single person that messages me or sends back a return. I know the steps that I have to follow. I follow these steps and it removes all the emotion, and I no longer get frustrated when I get a return request. I see it and I say, okay, I'll deal with it when it comes. Rule number 1 is I just accept the return. There is no point in arguing with the person. If they want to return the item, I accept the return. I have returns on all of my items except for items that I am selling for parts or repair only. I remove the return option from that because I don't want people buying things for parts or repair and then trying to repair it, saying it doesn't work and returning it. So I just remove it from that, but every single other item inside my store has a return policy and you can absolutely return the item. Now, the reason behind this is because if someone wants to return your item and you have returns turned off, it doesn't matter. All the person has to do is lie about it. eBay has the money back guarantee. As a buyer, they are protected to make sure that they get the item that they purchased. So if they're not happy with the pair of shoes that you just sold them because they don't fit quite right and you don't have returns on, instead of opening a return request for it not fitting, they're just going to open a return request and say that it's the wrong color, it's the wrong size, that the item isn't as described. These INADs, or item not as described return requests, are worse than just accepting an original return. When you get an INAD return, you can't withhold original shipping and you can't withhold the return shipping. You have to refund the whole amount and make the buyer whole on the transaction, because the way eBay looks at it is you as the seller messed up, so the buyer shouldn't have to pay for it. Now, if you turn on returns, there's a chance that the buyer will pick something like the item doesn't fit or they don't want it. Most people on eBay are actually honest buyers, and if they buy something and it doesn't fit, they're just going to say it doesn't fit and return it and move on. If you don't offer these buyers that option and it doesn't fit them and they want their money back, they're going to just lie about it. So my number 1 rule is just accept the return. Now, guys, I was going to release a different video this week. However, with this return request, eBay didn't help me, and I wanted to get this video out while it was still fresh on my mind. However, you're not going to want to miss next week's video, so do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss next week's video. My rule number 2 is the buyer pays for the shipping. So if it's a buyer's remorse reason, the buyer is going to pay for the shipping to them, the original shipping, and they're going to pay for the shipping back. Now, you can offer different policies within your return policies, and you can pay for the shipping both ways. If you pay for the return shipping and you offer 1-day handling time on shipping, you actually qualify for Top Rated Plus, which offers you 10% back on final value fees. This 10% is supposed to help offset the amount of returns that you will get, because if you open up free returns, you will see a slight increase in returns. Now, me personally, I don't do this. I sell a variety of items of different sizes and different weights, and it's too expensive for me to send something out and then pay for it to come back just because the person didn't want it. So instead, I have it where I can withhold the original shipping and the return shipping from the buyer so that the buyer paid shipping both ways. However, this is only if it's a buyer's remorse reason. So if the person puts that the item doesn't work, or it's an INAD, as in the item's not as described in the listing, I end up paying shipping both ways. However, it's less likely to happen if you offer the original returns from rule number 1. Now, if you sell a lot of smaller items that are lightweight and easy to ship, so think like clothing, CDs, video games, like if that's your whole niche, it might be worth it to offer the free returns, because you do get higher search placement. People will search for that. On the left-hand navigation, there's a way to search for listings that offer free returns, and eBay is going to give you 10% back on those final value fees. However, even in the clothing niche, there's a lot of returns for buyer's remorse, like doesn't fit. So you have to weigh the options and figure out which one works best for you. If you're unsure, give it a try on some of your listings and see if it's working. You can run multiple return policies, so you don't have to have one blanket one for your whole store. Now, I have 2 return policies, either no returns, and those are only for the items that I'm selling for parts or repair only, and the other one is I accept returns but buyer pays return shipping. Those are my 2 policies. However, if you sell in a different niche and you're not an everything seller like me, it might be worth it to experiment with free returns. Rule number 3, I don't argue with the buyer. I don't troubleshoot with the buyer. I just tell the person to return the item. Now, when I first was starting out and selling things and I would get a return request or a message from a buyer saying, hey, this item doesn't work, or this item isn't as described, I personally would reach out to the buyer and explain to them why the item is described. Hey, it is blue, like you're blind. Or, hey, did you put batteries in this? And I would spend a bunch of time trying to troubleshoot with these buyers. I have learned that it's just not worth the time. If someone messages me and says, hey, I want to return this item, or they open a return request, I just let it happen. Or if they message me, I have a pre-written out statement that I just send to them that tells them to open the return. And the reason behind this is I personally had to remove the emotion from it and remove my attachment from it. I get return requests every week, a few each week, and I can't be bothered sitting down and explaining to a buyer how something works, or how this shirt is actually blue even though they're saying it's light blue and the listing said that it was blue but never said it was light blue. And I'm not going to sit there and argue with the customer. At the end of the day, they most likely just want to return it anyway. So if you spend all this time arguing and troubleshooting with them, they're going to find it difficult to do that return. They're not going to purchase from eBay in the future because they're like, it's such a hassle to do a return. Think about the stores that you like that have a blanket return policy that as long as you have the receipt and you return the item, they're not going to sit there and question you and say, hey, did you make sure that this worked? Oh, are you sure that that was the color that you ordered? Like, Walmart doesn't do that. They don't have the time to do that. They're not going to sit there and argue with you. As long as you brought the receipt and the item that you bought, they're going to refund you. I've actually received from some customers these messages. You sent me a broken item. This VCR does not work. I want a refund right now, or I will leave you negative feedback. Or this message, I got this shirt today and the measurements you provided is a ½ inch smaller than the measurements you showed in your listing. Give me a partial refund and I'll just keep it. Now, I used to kind of get angry by these messages and be like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm not going to refund you because it's a ½ inch difference. Like, maybe you didn't pull the shirt all the way tight. Maybe your ruler's off. I don't know. But I'm not going to just give you a partial refund because you're demanding it from me. And with the VCR, I'm not going to sit there and troubleshoot it with you. You're already yelling at me. Yes, these messages are always sent in all caps because bad buyers send messages in all caps. And if you're unaware of this, go ahead and check out this video here where I break down what bad buyers are. So instead of me investing any time, effort, energy into these customers that are just trying to drain my energy, I already have a statement typed out that I just copy and paste and send back to them, and that's the end of it. I don't care that I'm getting the return back. Send me my item back. So the message I send helps me by removing my emotions from this transaction. It helps keep me away from these people so I'm not sitting there arguing with them and worrying about it. When I get these messages, I'm like, okay, I'm getting a return, and I move on with my day. I send them this message. Now, this message I might adapt to the person if it's like specific to like the item, or they're asking a specific question about the item, I might adapt it. This is generally what I will send to the buyer. I am sorry you are not happy with the item. I want all my customers to be happy with their purchase, and this is why I offer returns. Go ahead and open a return request on your order. Once I receive the item back in the original condition, I will issue you a refund. Thank you, Travis. Now, this kind of de-escalates things because I put my name in there and they're like, okay, I'm actually talking to a human. This isn't a scammer. This guy wasn't trying to hurt me. And it's also not argumentative. I'm sorry that you don't like the item. Here's what I can do for you. Return it. And this also stops people from saying, well, give me a partial refund. No, I'm not going to give you a partial refund because you're demanding it. I'm telling you this is the process. You follow the process, you'll get your money back. Now, there are a few exceptions to this. If I know I sent the wrong item, or I shipped something that was super fragile and they send me pictures of the box and it shows that it got crushed or ran over by a mail truck or something, I may issue a refund and not require it. I may reach out and say, hey, would you take a partial refund instead of returning this? There are some cases where I do that, but generally speaking, most customers that reach out to me and start complaining about the item, I just tell them it's no problem, send me it back. And it totally takes the power away from them, and it gives them the ability to return the item and continue on with their day as well. Rule number 4 was a huge one for me, and it is I don't sell things that I can't afford to lose. And it took me a while to get here because I would go out to a thrift store or yard sale and I would see things that were profitable. However, I would either have to spend a lot of money to get these items and the margins were thin, or the item was very large and heavy and it required a lot of shipping costs. So if I got a return on it, it might destroy whatever margin I had left on that item. So I no longer pick up items that I can't afford to lose. When I ship something out, I have no attachment to it and I don't care whether it gets broken in the mail or gets returned back to me. It doesn't matter. It's just an item I'm sending out to a customer, and if it comes back, it comes back. I refund them and move on. You have to understand your margins. If you don't understand your margins, you don't know if you can afford a return on an item. If you're picking up an item and praying that everything goes right in order to make a few bucks, you're doing eBay wrong. There's plenty of items out there with huge margins that you can pick up every day at your thrift store, and these items will sell and they're not going to cost you your whole business because you spent a lot of money on this item or it costs a lot to ship. And if you want to learn some of these items, go ahead and check out the link in my description where I have a free BOLO list that is updated daily with a new BOLO. And these are actual items that you can find every day at any thrift store in America. So you might be thinking, well, really, what could go wrong? If you send out an expensive item, it's going to come back. Well, think about this. And I actually don't know how retail arbitrage people do it because the margins are so thin on most retail arbitrage that it just doesn't make sense that if you have a few returns of this item that you pick up, it could kill your whole profit margin and make that whole deal not worth it. So maybe you find out that Best Buy is selling a computer for real cheap, and you can go out to Best Buy today and buy a bunch of them for $400, and that they sell for $800 on eBay. So you're like, dang, there's a $400 profit margin there. I'm going to run out and buy them all. Now you're putting out a lot of money. Say you buy 10 of those, that's $4,000 in inventory that you now have tied up in these products. Now, how many of them do you have to sell to break even? These are questions you need to be asking yourself if you're making these large purchases with a large capital investment with thin margins. Because all it takes is that buyer to get that brand new sealed computer in the box, and they open it up and they go and they use it for a couple weeks and they say, you know what, I actually don't like this computer. They stuff it back in the box and they open an INAD request saying that this computer doesn't work. eBay is going to force you to take that return. That computer is coming back to you in a used condition. Now remember, you spent $400 on it, but the buyer paid $800. So it's coming back to you. Now you open that item up and you're like, okay, it's the same computer. It seems to work and everything. Well, too bad. eBay's going to make you refund that buyer. It doesn't matter that they opened the item. eBay's going to allow you to take up to 50% back, and that's only if you are a top-rated seller or if you offer free returns. So even on the best case scenario, you get this used computer back, and now you have to refund that buyer $400 back plus the shipping both ways. So now you are in the negative on that computer. Now, yes, you do have a used computer that you can go and sell, but worst case is that buyer destroyed the computer. They took it and they dropped it in a puddle and it's fried computer. Too bad. eBay's still going to make you refund that $400 out of that original $800. So think about this before you go and sell these kinds of items. Now, me personally, I still pick up high-priced items. I still pick up large items. However, if I can't afford to lose it, as in like this is going to affect my business, I'm going to sell it locally or I'm going to sell it on another platform. I'm not going to sell it on eBay because eBay is going to make you take that return and it's too high of a risk for me and my business. And this goes for large items as well. I have almost completely stopped selling VCR DVD combos, kitchen appliances, and big, large car parts because it eats up a lot of shipping. They're high return rate items. If you've ever sold VCRs or car parts, you know they come back a lot. So if you're selling these large items that have a lot of shipping and people are saying they don't work and they send them back, how big is your profit margin on this VCR DVD combo? It's probably not big enough to cover shipping both directions. So it's just not worth me selling those anymore. Now, I will occasionally still pick up large car parts or even VCR DVD combos, but the margins have to be there. They have to be big enough for me to be able to ship that item to the customer and receive the return back and still have a little bit of meat on the bone to sell that item again. Rule number 5, I follow eBay policies and procedures. eBay has a bunch of policies and procedures that protect the buyer and the seller. And if you don't know these, I highly suggest that you go on the eBay and start reading some of them. Read what your protections are. Read and understand when you can withhold money from a buyer. Read and understand when a buyer can force a return. Read and understand how you can appeal different things. If you have a good understanding of what the rules are and you play by the rules and you don't do sketchy things, you're not going to lose a lot of money. I'm out at the thrift store and yard sales pretty frequently, and one thing that runs very common amongst sellers is that they're afraid to sell on eBay and they're afraid to sell online because of the returns. It keeps a lot of competition off of eBay, which is great for people like me and you that are willing to take the risk of selling something and possibly having a return. When you first start selling on eBay, you may get 1 or 2 returns and it might turn you completely off and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to sell at yard sales. I'm just going to sell locally. eBay's too much of a pain. But as you sell more and more and more, you'll learn that returns aren't that frequent and they're really not that big of a deal. That the majority of my returns are actually item doesn't fit. It's clothing or shoes, they get it, they don't like the fit, they return it, and it costs me nothing. They pay shipping both ways, it comes back to me, it takes me a little bit of time to process that return and relist it and put it back away. But other than that, I'm not out any actual cash. I'll sell it again, I'll sell it to someone else who actually wants it, and it's no big deal. However, a lot of people will get very upset and get very emotional about it. And like I said, this is a great thing. Keep those people away. Just when someone tells me like, oh, I could never do eBay because of the returns, I say, yeah, the returns are horrible. I wouldn't recommend it either. All I do is deal with returns every day. And if they don't want to put in that extra effort, I understand. Some people don't want to risk selling these items because they have too much tied up into it. They pay too much for the item or they get the money and they spend it. Another tip is to never spend the money before the return policy ends. So I get paid every week. However, I always make sure that I have enough money to cover all the items that I have sent out. So if every item that I sent out within the last 30 days gets returned, I have enough money in my bank account that it does not affect me. It doesn't shut me down. I don't have to starve. I don't have to go live in a cardboard box. I know that I have enough business money set to the side so that if people start opening a bunch of returns for whatever reason or the post office loses a bunch of mail, that it's not going to sink my ship. Don't spend the money before the return window is closed because that's when you get in trouble. That's when you start getting emotional. That's when you get that $300 return and your payout this week is only $100 on eBay and you're like, man, they're actually going to take money out of my bank account just to pay this customer back who might even be lying about the item. And that's when you get really turned off from the platform versus, oh, they're going to take money out of my account to pay back that buyer. But it's not a big deal because that's my business account. I have money set to the side just for this reason, and I'm going to continue selling more items, and it doesn't matter that I got a return back. Returns are just part of the game. So this brings me to my story this week. I received a return request about a week and a half ago for a pair of jeans. These were fairly expensive jeans. They sold for like $80 plus shipping, and the buyer paid like $92 in total. The buyer opened a return request saying that the item doesn't fit, and I have automatic return request approval on, so it just automatically sends that buyer the label, and I don't even think about it. I saw it come across on my phone. I said, cool, I'm getting those jeans back, no big deal. A few days go by, I eventually get the return, and I don't think too much of it. However, I always do open returns and I check and make sure that the item is returned in somewhat sellable condition and that I don't have to withhold any shipping. However, when I open up the packaging, I see right away that these are not the same jeans that I sold the buyer. I sold the buyer nice jeans with no holes, rips, or anything on it, and these jeans came back with a bunch of holes and rips. And I thought, okay, they wore them, they destroyed them, I don't understand. But then I started looking a little closer, and I saw that these jeans in particular were not the same pair of jeans that I sold the buyer. These are a different model number, a different size, a different color code, and in a different condition. So I was like, crap, I've never experienced this before. Let me reach out to eBay and see what happens. So I go on and I chat the robot until it finally decides to give me someone to talk to. So someone gives me a phone call and the lady's talking to me and she's very nice and she's telling me, oh yeah, I can see that you got that return today. What I want you to do is take some pictures of those jeans, send a message to the buyer with the pictures saying that these aren't that this isn't the item that you sent the buyer. And I said, okay, I did that, now what? And she says, okay, well, I just looked at the pictures and I can see, yeah, they're a completely different pair of jeans. It's no big deal. Do not refund the buyer. And I said, I don't refund the buyer? And she says, no, don't refund the buyer. She said, I can't do anything for you right now because there's not a case open. However, if you don't refund the buyer, it's going to open a case in 48 hours. After those 48 hours, someone will review why this return wasn't processed, and they're going to side with you and let you keep your money and the item. And I said, okay, that seems too easy, but thank you for your help. And I hung up the phone. And I then started to dig a little bit deeper and remember some things. And one of the things on eBay, if you don't know, is you always have to take an action. Don't listen to customer service reps that say, just let this open, just let this case close without seller resolution. Letting a case open and close without seller resolution is a huge deal on eBay. eBay tracks this metric, cases closed without seller resolution, and I try to keep my number as low as possible. So I was starting to think to myself, I'm like, wait, if I don't do anything and I just don't refund this buyer and it goes past the 48 hours of when you have to refund the buyer, it's going to open a case and it's automatically just going to close in the buyer's favor. No one's going to look at the messages I sent to the buyer. No one's going to look at any of this. So I was like, that seems off. So I started to dig a little deeper and I went into the returns and I was thinking maybe there's something in there. Now, if you go into your returns and you open up that window, there'll be a few different options that you can pick. And one of the options that I'm very familiar with is I received this item back in a different condition. What it's going to say when you click that is it's going to say, thank you for reporting the buyer. Now please refund the buyer. And the reason eBay does this is that's their policy. If you get the same item back, even if it's in a different condition, so like that VCR DVD combo that I sold where people took parts out of it, it doesn't matter. I got the original item back. I have to refund that buyer something. I can withhold up to 50%, but as far as eBay is concerned, I have to refund them something because I got the item back. It doesn't matter what condition it came back in, I got it back. This was different though, because this was a completely different item. So there was another option on the drop down, and that said, buyer returned different item or empty box. I was like, okay, well that fits. So I clicked that and I was kind of expecting it to say, thanks for reporting the buyer, now refund the buyer. However, it didn't. It came up to a box where you can fill in a bunch of details and upload some photos. So I thought, oh, perfect, great. This is exactly what I was looking for. I don't know why the customer service rep didn't tell me this. So I go in there and I tell the whole story. I describe in detail how I know for a fact these are different jeans because they're a different model, they're a different size, they're a different condition, and they're a different color. So I describe all of that, and I describe my conversation on the phone with the customer service rep, and I ask for eBay's help. I upload a bunch of photos showing what I sold the buyer, showing the pair of jeans that I received back, showing the details and the model number and the size. I give eBay all the information that they could ever want. And then I hit submit. It says something along the lines of, thank you, a case has been opened and we will review this and get back to you within 72 hours. Between the time that I had sent the message the first time with the first customer service rep on the phone and the time that I opened this case, the buyer actually sent me back a message. Crap, I may have gotten two returns mixed up on accident. I can pay for return shipping. If that's the case, I'm sure I'm going to get an email from the other sender. Do you mind shipping the item back to me at my expense? I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Now, you can read into this how you want. However, what I saw was either this buyer realized that they just got caught by returning a pair of jeans that they didn't want to me that were damaged and ripped, or the buyer did get two returns actually accidentally mixed up. However, I was thinking to myself, how am I going to charge this buyer for shipping? And eBay is requiring me to issue this buyer a refund on this case within 48 hours of receiving the item. As far as eBay is concerned, I received the item. So I have a lot of questions, so I hop on and I call eBay again. Now, the lady on the phone the first time told me she couldn't do anything because there wasn't a case open. So I was like, oh great, now there's a case open, they can do something. So I hop back on the phone with eBay, I get a different customer service rep. This guy doesn't quite seem to understand what I'm telling him. He's just kind of saying, oh yeah, I see it, different pair of jeans. I can't do anything. There's a case, it's out of my hands. There's a whole different case department that looks it over. And rest assured that we have all the information here. We can see that the buyer returned a different item, and don't refund the buyer and we'll handle this case. So I'm thinking, okay, not quite the answer I was looking for, but good enough. They know it, they can see all this information, they have all the information there. While on the phone with the rep, I also ask him about the message from the buyer. And he says, yeah, we can see that message from the buyer. Unfortunately, there is no way for you to charge the buyer for return shipping and us to not force you to return this buyer. And how is the buyer going to return to you the correct pair of jeans if he doesn't even have them, supposedly? I'm sure now that eBay is going to make the right decision and not force me to refund the buyer. So after talking to this rep, I'm kind of reassured that they have all the information. They can see the messages with the buyer. They can see that I received the wrong item. They can see that the buyer kind of admits to returning the wrong item. So I go to bed and I wake up in the morning with two different messages from eBay. The first one is an email from what says as a customer service representative, but it reads like AI wrote it, and it's very scammy and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And what they're telling me is that here's how your policies protect you and here's what you can do in the future, but it doesn't really give me an answer. Now, the other message I received from eBay was this: we reviewed this case and decided to issue the buyer a refund. We understand that you received the item back in a different condition than when you shipped it, but unfortunately we couldn't determine that this was caused by the buyer or it was something in the buyer's control. A refund of $92.48 was issued to your buyer. The refund includes the purchase price plus the original shipping. The refund amount will be recovered from you by eBay. So I go to my account and sure enough, they pulled $92.48 out of my account. The interesting part about this is everyone gets paid except for the sellers. So the post office got paid to ship the item to them and paid to ship the item back. The customer gets a full refund, even though that the item doesn't fit, and my return policy says that the buyer pays shipping both ways. But now the buyer gets a completely free refund, and eBay doesn't prorate the refund, as in eBay doesn't give back any of the seller fees. So they took actually $92 from my account. Now, what I got paid out from eBay when I sold these jeans wasn't even close to $92 because there's taxes and then there's also eBay fees. eBay doesn't care. They don't give back their fees once a case has been opened. I do believe that is so that they have a little bit of extra margin so that when people complain, they can refund them, and hopefully that when they take all the money from some sellers, they can help offset the cost of other sellers. However, I think, in my opinion, it's completely unfair that eBay takes all these fees and gets paid for a buyer returning the wrong item and tells me that they understand what happened. They don't understand what happened. They tell me in this message that the buyer returned the item in a different condition. No, the buyer returned a completely different item. It said it in the messages, it said it in the description I sent them, it said it in the photos. I talked to two different customer service reps. They both said that they understood this. However, this was the response I got from them. So I've had other cases closed that I don't agree with, and every time I call eBay, they say, the customer service rep says something like, I can't do any kind of appeal for you. All I can do is tell you to file the appeal online. So I skip the step of calling the eBay customer service reps, and I go directly online and start the appeal process. The appeal process is essentially the same process that I just went through. I upload all the photos and all the information, and I explain how these are different jeans and how it's not in the same condition. I reword it slightly so that it's more clear that it is not the same pair of jeans in a different condition. So I take all this information and I feed it into ChatGPT, because now I'm starting to believe that eBay only uses AI to read these messages and correspond back to you, because the email I got back didn't make any sense. It was very broken and computer-like. It wasn't like there was an actual person behind it. And then I want to make sure that if this message is being read also by a computer, that the computer is going to understand that this is a different item. ChatGPT gives me some information. I take that, copy and paste it. I submit that appeal process, and I think, okay, let's see what happens. So I wake up the next morning to another email from eBay, and once again, this email was either written by a computer AI program, or it was a fill-in-the-blank template that someone used to send me this message, because a lot of it is very generic and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. The wording is off, the spacing is off. It actually looks like a scam email, but I read it anyways because it's directly on eBay, so I know it's not actually a scam. This customer service rep says that she understands that I received a different item back, and she goes into all the different things about this item and tries to explain to me that she knows the case, and then says that in order for her to process any kind of refund, I need to sign this declaration. And this declaration isn't like an e-sign. It isn't anything that you would think a billion-dollar company has. It is literally attached to the bottom of this email, and she says to print it out, sign it, take a picture, and submit the picture back to this case. I'm thinking, like, how is this legit? Like, this is crazy that eBay, a billion-dollar company, can't send me an attachment, can't have like an actual Dropbox, can't have anything that looks legitimate, that just on the bottom of this email chain is this random declaration that looks super sketchy, because it's not even an attachment that you can print out. So I take a screenshot, I crop it, I print it out, I sign it, that I didn't receive back the original item that I sent the buyer, and I take a picture of it with my phone and I upload that to the eBay files and I submit it that way. It seems sketchy to me. It doesn't seem like it's very like legal by any stretch of the imagination. Like, it's fill in the blank kind of thing, and I took a screenshot and then printed it out and then submitted it in the case files. It's not until the next day that I receive a message back from, yet again, another customer service rep. So if you're counting here, we talked to the first lady, we talked to the second guy on the phone, then we had some computer person, AI person send me the response saying that it wasn't approved. Now we have this lady saying that I need to upload a declaration. And now we have another lady who reaches out and says that she would like to thank me for my time and effort in resolving the issue and providing the affidavit. And she's sorry that the buyer returned a different item, and goes over my seller protections. She says, I totally commend you for your willingness and efforts to resolve this case through our process. Your professionalism is truly commendable. I guess all that information is real nice. She then goes in and explains to me how I can report the buyer, which, like, hey, I've reported the buyer 3 times now, so like, you guys already have the information. Why do I need to report the buyer again? However, the best part is she told me that they would be issuing me a full refund for this purchase. So the end of the day, eBay did do the right thing. eBay refunded me and stuck by their seller protections because the buyer returned a completely different item. However, the fight and the effort that I went through for this return was not worth the $92. And to be perfectly honest with you, when I first submitted the first claim, that was probably about where I would have ended up stopping, because it's just not worth my time to sit down and fill out all this information and worry about it. Normally, I would have probably just refunded the buyer the 50% and moved on. However, I thought that this would be a good learning experience for me, because now I understand the full process, and for you guys watching as well. So if you do get an item back that isn't the actual item that you sent the buyer, it's actual fraud, or maybe they mixed it up, but either way, you don't receive back the original item from eBay. Do know that you are protected. However, it may take a while for you to get your money back, and it may be a battle. Now, I had to talk to 5 different customer service reps and fill out a bunch of different information and jump through a bunch of different hoops just to get my money back. My time would have been better spent by just issuing that 50% refund, saying that the item came back in a different condition, and moving on. Because by the time I had issued that 50% refund, withheld the shipping, and eBay took the fees off, I would have been out maybe $20 in all total. And honestly, the $20 savings by going around and around with eBay isn't worth the time and it isn't worth the energy. And I think eBay's counting on this. I think eBay counts on sellers to get fed up with their processes and just not follow through with it. How many times has a seller complained about receiving this item and gotten all these emails and said, you know what, it's not even worth my time, and moves on? eBay got to keep their fees. The post office got paid for shipping the item. The buyer's happy because he returned the wrong item and got paid for it. Everyone's happy except for the seller. I think eBay's counting on that. Now, this isn't to say eBay's a bad platform and you shouldn't sell on eBay. I love eBay. eBay does a great job. And 9 times out of 10, if you push hard enough, you will be able to have them enforce their actual rules and procedures. However, I think as a billion-dollar company, they could make it a lot easier for sellers to do. But part of that is they don't want sellers abusing this program. I'm sure eBay tracks how many times you go through this program. So I went through it now once with jeans, and if I do it again next week, they might start looking at me and saying, why is Travis all of a sudden every return that Travis gets back, he says isn't the correct item, that these buyers aren't all scamming Travis, and they're gonna look into my account, and maybe they even end up removing my account just because I keep opening these. I don't think this is a very common occurrence. Like I said, I've sold thousands of items on eBay, and I can count on one hand the amount of times that there was a problem where I had to dig this deep into something, whether it's someone returning the wrong item or someone returning an item that they took parts off of. Most times you're pretty well covered. There are some costs of just doing business. If you do business and you sell things online, there is a risk in it. We get paid to accept that risk. That's why you got to make sure your margins are there. If you enjoyed this video, YouTube thinks you're going to enjoy this one, so go ahead and give it a click.